For USCFootball.com, I'm Jack Smith, joined by Connor Morrissette for Instant Analysis after USC's 38-21 win in the Coliseum over Wisconsin. Didn't think we were going to be saying that at halftime as the Trojans trailed by 11, but they rattle off 28 consecutive points. They hold Wisconsin scoreless in the second half, and they have their first win as members of the Big Ten Conference.
What a difference a half makes, Jack. And you just wondered at halftime, it could have gone one or two ways. USC would either continue to make mistakes, they had the 3 turnovers at halftime, or they would improve, and they improved drastically. Starts with the defense, holding Wisconsin scoreless, and to only the 81 yards, I believe, in the second half. D'Anton Lynn, he made some masterful adjustments at halftime. And talking to players after, we asked, what was different? And they would just say the mindset, the intensity. I'm sure there was some X's and O's differences as well, so we'll have to go back and look schematically on that when we rewatch the game. But that's where I start. And then to score the 3 offensive touchdowns, because Mason Cobb had a pick 6, it was a much cleaner operation for USC in that second half. Started a little bit slow, but that second half, I think, alleviated any major concerns as a double-digit favorite at home. Like, if you lose that game, then, man, this season looks a whole lot different. But to come back, cover the spread, do really well in that second half, all of a sudden, heading into the road game at Minnesota, I think people are going to feel pretty good. You can't continue to start slow, and USC and Lincoln Riley acknowledged that. But if you play like you did in that second half, you're going to win a lot of games.
Yeah, it did feel like at halftime, A, it was the worst half that USC had played all season. Yeah. Worse than the Michigan first half. But B, like, you could feel that they were probably still in it. They did outgain Wisconsin in the first half. They killed the time of possession battle in the first half. I mean, Wisconsin barely had the ball for 10 minutes in that first half, so they tired out the defense, and it just felt like, okay, if you can just actually field a punt, if you don't turn it over in plus territory twice, you might have been the better team. If you don't have all of these pre-snap penalties and dumb mistakes on a 4th and 1 false starting and then forcing a field goal, it did feel like USC had changes it could make to get back in the game, and it did feel like they pulled the right strings to pull away in the second half.
And I look from an offensive perspective at Miller Moss, the leader, the quarterback, the guy who he had the interception, which I didn't think was a great throw. But again, it's to Zachariah Branch. Could he have done a better job? We can debate that. Not a great throw from Moss. And then he has the strip sack at the end of the first half. Not really his fault. Elijah Page was beaten on the blitz. Lincoln Riley talked about how you got to have a tough quarterback, and that sort of sets the tone for your team. And other quarterbacks, after a disappointing first half, with the way the USC offensive line blocked against Michigan, and some of those concerns popped up again in that first half against Wisconsin, like Moss could have, I don't want to say went into the tank, but he could have struggled in that second half, and he came back, he set the tone. USC did really well outside of that first driver. They had a 3-and-out. They get a little lucky with the muff punt from Wisconsin, but hey, sometimes you need to get a little bit lucky. Zachariah Branch, of course, had a muff of his own in that first half, so the two teams were even there. But I thought Moss really set the tone, and in that second half, he was dynamite. That blitz on the 3rd down touchdown pass to Deuce Robinson, Moss hung in there. He threw a great pass to Robinson, who scored a touchdown. Jacoby Lane, that first drive, what a ball by Miller Moss, one of his best throws of the season, put it right between the two defensive backs. That was beautiful. And then he goes back to Jacoby Lane on another 3rd down, I believe, in the second half for another touchdown. Really, really impressive by Miller Moss, and I think it gives you a chance to win every week. He's really good in the pocket. He even ran a little bit today. I don't know how much he'll run in the future because he had that concussion scare on his touchdown scamper, but very impressed with what he did today and the toughness and why you're able to come back. The defense, of course, has a big part of it, but you need your quarterback to play a big role, and once again, Miller Moss did really, really well in my opinion.
And that's especially, too, with Wisconsin dropping back into coverage, it seemed like a lot. They'd have 3 down linemen. You look at the play, you're like, okay, Lincoln Riley and USC will run the football here. They'll trust that offensive line. And no, Moss just continued to drop back to pass. I don't know if it's Lincoln Riley thought that he could find holes with those linebackers in coverage for Wisconsin, and they found a lot. It's not like receivers weren't open, but I was a little surprised USC didn't try and run the ball more. They did start to run the ball a little bit when they got the lead, and it just felt like Wisconsin had no momentum. So Lincoln Riley, too, trusting his defense, knowing they could get off the field without allowing points. But Miller Moss, even with defenders dropping back and still being able to get a little bit of pressure on him, I thought he was masterful today. And to see him make that move on the run with the spin move on 4th and 1 when he kept it, and then fall backwards and lunge across for the touchdown, everyone we talked to after the game except for Miller Moss was like, I didn't know he had that in him. I didn't know he could do that. He doesn't do that in practice. That was one of the more remarkable plays that we've seen from him in his USC career.
A couple of design runs from him. He had one earlier, and he thought he was hit late, and he probably was. I'm sure they'll emphasize sliding with him this week if he continues to run. But, yeah, it was great to see him get the touchdown. It wasn't great to see him hit his head on the turf. With Jaden Maeva warming up on the sideline at that point when Moss was still in the tent being injured. He came in at the last second and returned, and then he did the post-game press conference. So he was cleared from that concussion. I don't even know if he had one. Probably not if he was able to come back into the game. So that was very reassuring. I'm sure they'll work offensively on him running and just what they want that to look like. But yeah, I thought his leadership really stood out today, as it has all season. And again, I just go back to what Riley said afterwards. How tough you are as a team, that really starts with the toughness of a quarterback. I believe his quote was, "I'll show you a tough team and they'll have a tough quarterback. I'll show you a not tough team. They won't have a tough quarterback." Is anyone questioning Moss's toughness right now? I don't think so.
No, he might be one of the toughest quarterbacks in the country, and certainly that USC has had in a long time. One of the biggest question marks coming in today was the sophomore receivers. Lincoln Riley on Thursday, when I asked him about them, didn't want to make any sweeping generalizations or diagnose their play so far through 3 games. But we weren't as impressed as we thought we might have been by the foursome of Mekhi Lemon, Zachariah Branch, Jacoby Lane, and Deuce Robinson. Now, they were without one of their 4 horsemen today, with Mekhi Lemon out with injury. The other 3 combined, though, for over 200 yards. You get the first ever 100-yard game of Jacoby Lane's career. Deuce Robinson with a touchdown catch, as well as a big bomb down the left sideline. He fought back for the football against one of the best secondaries in the Big Ten, especially on the outside with some of those corners. I thought USC's sophomore receivers, led by Jacoby Lane, had a phenomenal game.
Lane was tremendous in this one, and all the talk in the offseason was that these sophomore receivers were going to set the tone. It's taken them a little bit to adjust, but you could see how high of a ceiling Jacoby Lane has in this game. I'm sure Wisconsin's defensive backs will be having nightmares, and the coaching staff as well. You can't put him in single coverage. We learned that this afternoon, and even in that first play where the safety was running over to try to bat that ball away, Miller Moss threw a perfect pass to Lane, and he hauled it in. That wasn't double coverage because the safety came over late, but if Moss is firing like he is and Lane can beat that corner like he showed he can today, USC is going to have a lot of success. And I don't know if this means that Jacoby Lane is for sure USC's number 1 receiver. He certainly looked like it today. LSU, the game, we saw a lot of Kyron Hudson, and you just kind of wonder, well, is he going to be the number 1 receiver? I don't want to say he's limited, but Jacoby Lane's ceiling is just a lot higher than some of these other receivers in the room. And for him to really flex his muscle, for him to have his first 100-yard game, USC's kind of looking for that top dog receiver, that alpha. He made his claim for that today, and if he can continue to do that, USC's going to have a lot of success. I like that Miller Moss throws the ball around and spreads it out, but it's always really helpful to have that guy you can really rely on, and Lane looked like it today, especially on that one play, Jack, where he got almost decapitated. His helmet flies off, steps right up, makes the first down sign. To have 2 touchdowns along with that and then 7 other catches, definitely his best game as a Trojan, and I'm excited to see what his future looks like. He looked like a number 1 alpha dog receiver today, and that's what we heard all offseason.
I think one of the biggest differences from the 2022 USC team that had so much success and the 2023 team, people talk about the wide receiver room in general, but I think the main difference was you didn't have one guy to go to all the time, especially on third downs. Jordan Addison was so good at that in 2022. It felt like when nobody else was open, he'd find 1 yard of separation on third down, and Williams would find him for a first down. That's kind of what Jacoby Lane did today, and I'm not saying he's Jordan Addison. They play a completely different style of game. But if you're looking for one receiver that just finds a way to get an inch of separation when they need to on third down or in the red zone, or you can't afford to leave him in single coverage, it does feel like Jacoby Lane of this group is that guy. And there were countless times today where just didn't feel like USC had anything open. Jacoby Lane would have an inch of space on the sideline. He'd get both feet in bounds, and he'd come up with the clutch first down catch.
Absolutely. On third down, he was consistently really good, and hearing you say that, Jack, makes me think about that second touchdown where USC was sort of stalling in the red zone, and then what do you dial up? My good on your good, the Wisconsin secondary, the strength of that defense. Jacoby Lane having the great game today. Moss throws up a fade ball to him. He comes down with it. I don't want to say that's indefensible because they're really good defensive backs who could play that differently, and nothing is 100%, but that's a really hard play to defend, and we saw that today from USC. I wouldn't be surprised if Lincoln Riley continues to call that play in a third down situation when USC needs to be bailed out, because consistently Jacoby Lane's been making those this year, and I think that might turn into USC's bread and butter.
And it's not normally a piece of Lincoln Riley's offense. He's not a big fan of that 50-50 ball. Those get intercepted, and USC saw that earlier in the game with Zachariah Branch. But if you're going to throw it to one guy, it's probably Jacoby Lane. Deuce Robinson had one as well down the left sideline on a slot fade, and those two are so good at making contested catches. What were your thoughts on the offensive line's performance today?
I thought they bounced back, and by and large, in pass protection, they were pretty good. The one key mistake came at the end of the first half when Elijah Page was beaten on the blitz and Miller Moss had that fumble. But Miller Moss, of course, any quarterback needs time. He's so good moving around in the pocket. Even if there are breakdowns, he can usually navigate around them. The problem is, and we saw it against Michigan, if you just get beaten straight up and you have absolutely no time, even Caleb Williams couldn't avoid some of the hits that Moss took against Michigan. So I thought the offensive line bounced back for the better for sure. A few mistakes here and there, but it wasn't like that Michigan game where Moss would drop back to pass and just be on his backside almost instantly. So that was reassuring. I think it's interesting that Amos Talele got the start and then Alani Noah traded off every series with him at right guard. I'm not an offensive line coach, of course, but I would prefer USC just to roll with 5 guys and try to lock that group in. Maybe today was still an open competition because Josh Henson didn't like what he saw from Alani Noah against Michigan. I don't know who won that competition today. Noah, of course, had that key false start, but I didn't really notice either of those guys getting burned badly like we did against Michigan. So I thought they took a step in the right direction. Is it a unit that I feel great about? No, but they played well enough to win today for sure. USC outscoring Wisconsin 28-0 in the second half. That was really reassuring. And I think if you play well enough to win, you'll have an awesome opportunity. Just don't get beaten straight up. And they really didn't outside of that one play today, so that was good.
One of the main things I was looking for today is how is USC going to respond on the defensive line to Bear Alexander redshirting. Like, is the drama going to show that group is just not on the same page? Are they not going to be locked in? But then also, are you going to miss that body on the defensive line? The most impactful defensive lineman in terms of potential, in terms of game-breaking ability. And in that first half, USC did get gashed a little bit on the run. Now, one time they were put on the field at the 18-yard line right after a muff, and they give up an 18-yard run. I don't put that on the defense quite as much, but they responded in the second half. They stuffed the line of scrimmage a lot when Wisconsin would try and run the ball. And I thought, by and large, they played great, especially on a 4th and 1 stop, where they were just all up, muddling the defensive line, and then Kamari Ramsey flew in for the stop.
At one point in the first half, Wisconsin was averaging over 6 yards a carry, and I couldn't help but think if Bear Alexander was playing and he earned more time, what this running attack for Wisconsin would look like with him in the middle. But then the adjustments in the second half, Kamari Ramsey making that big 4th down stop, that, if you're a USC fan, I think has to give you confidence in this USC defensive line in the post-Bear Alexander era. Holding that offense that wants to run the ball to only 81 yards, it almost leaves you speechless based on what happened in that first half where they had that 18-yard touchdown, like a snap of the finger after the muff. They were in the end zone. The defense almost looked shell-shocked a little bit. For Eric Gentry to miss a good amount of that second half, he picked up an injury. Lincoln Riley had no update on him, by the way. For him, one of your best run defenders to not be in the game, and for USC to still play the way they did, that was really encouraging. So I think they looked really good. Of course, you don't want another injury or another absence in the middle there. There's only so much you can take. But I am really confident in the USC defense, especially for what they did in that second half. I don't think you can throw the first half away. I need to see the team play a little bit better consistently in first halves after the last 2 weeks. But only 81 yards in that second half. The adjustments that they made were really, really impressive. And it was everyone, all 3 phases, or all 3 different groups, the defensive linemen, the linebackers, the secondary, they were all great in the second half. If USC can keep that up, they're going to be in a really good spot.
Yeah, we asked about every player we talked to as well. What do you need to do to avoid coming out slow when you go on the road to Minnesota and any of these other games? No one gave a concrete answer, and we weren't exactly expecting one, but just curious to see if they noticed anything that was wrong. And they said they just got to come out with that first play mentality. Play the first half like it's the most important thing. And maybe that they've underestimated their competition in the last 2 weeks. I'd also say they didn't really have a lot of tape on the offenses that they were facing in the first half in the last couple of weeks. I mean, Alex Orji and that Michigan offense, that's like facing a team in an opener where you really don't know what it's going to look like. Braden Locke, he started a couple games last year. He played in the Tyler Van Dyke offense last 2 weeks ago against Alabama when he came in when Van Dyke tore his ACL. So in the first half in each of the last 2 weeks, I do want to give USC a slight break because I'm not sure if they knew what to expect from the offenses that it was facing. That being said, you go on the road to Minnesota next week. You're going to have tape on Minnesota. They saw it against Michigan this week in the Big House. You have to come out strong in the first half, and both offensively and defensively. I don't think you can afford another slow start. And if you see one, I think then some big questions have to be asked.
I agree. I still expect USC to go on the road and beat Minnesota, but if you have 3 first-half turnovers and come out slow, that makes it a lot harder. I don't know how many USC fans watched the Minnesota-Michigan game, but Minnesota almost had a great second-half comeback. I think they scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter to make that game really close. They had an onside kick that they recovered, but then the officials called an offside, so that ultimately ended their comeback bid. My point is they finished that game really strong. USC finished that game really strong today, and we'll see what that looks like. Minnesota's going to be desperate. They've lost their first 2 Big Ten games to Iowa and then to Michigan today. It doesn't get any easier for them with USC coming in now, but that's a desperate team that's at home. It's a real must-win for PJ Fleck's team. I don't anticipate them coming out slow because they're going to have a sense of urgency. USC needs to match that.
What does this game do for your perception of USC going forward? And as you look forward at the USC schedule and knowing that they can afford to maybe lose one more game and make the college football playoff, from what you saw today, what do you see for USC the rest of the season?
Well, at halftime I was nervous, but now I feel the exact same way I did at the beginning of the game before what transpired here today took place, because coming in it was just like, yeah, you lost to Michigan, tough game. If your offensive line plays better, then USC still has the opportunity to win a lot of games. I thought their offensive line did play better today, took that step forward, and defensively so good in the second half. Like, nothing's going to be perfect. There are going to be mistakes. It's not always going to be totally clean. Nothing's linear, like, oh, we played really well this week, that means automatically we're going to play really well the next week. There's ups and downs, highs and lows, and I felt like USC battled back really well, so that impressed me. Was it perfect? No, but I still feel like this team has the opportunity to potentially make the college football playoff, which I felt coming into this game. At halftime, I was kind of like, oh, I'm not so sure. But, yeah, I feel very similar to how I did. The only real glaring weakness coming out of that Michigan game, in my opinion, was the offensive line. They look better today. That's sort of going to determine the fate of the season, in my opinion, because I think defensively USC will be in most of these games with D'Anton Lynn, and assuming everyone's healthy. Eric Gentry was hurt today, of course, and Achille Arnold was out. But I like the USC defense a lot. That offensive line gives Miller Moss an opportunity with Lincoln Riley play calling. USC should have a chance to win a lot of games, and I still feel that way.
We'll break down the win a little bit more tomorrow on Tunnel Vision, but the Trojans roar back for a second half, come back for the second straight week. This time they're able to hold on, and they stake their claim with a pick 6 from Mason Cobb to really leave no doubt in a victory here at home. Trojans win it 38-21, and we'll have more thoughts tomorrow. But for now, thank you for watching Instant Analysis. Alongside Connor Morrissette, I'm Jack Smith. Make sure you're checking out USCfootball.com for more.